Hello, my name is Rowena Johnston and I am the Housing Australia Executive responsible for leading the launch and implementation of the NHIF program. Before we commence, I'd like to formally acknowledge that I speak to you today from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this land and to elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people looking at this information session. Thank you for taking the time to listen to information about this important program that we are so pleased to be launching nationally. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the many people that have contributed to the formation of this program, including my Housing Australia colleagues and our partners at state and territory governments, industry peak bodies, and experts in the sector that have contributed so meaningfully. We've been conducting information sessions on this program nationally over the last month, and I thank those that were able to attend and contribute to those sessions. We have consolidated learnings and outcomes from these sessions that will be available on our website, and I will share details of those at the end of this session. So Housing Australia have been administering the National Housing Infrastructure Fund, or NHIF, since 2018, providing loan and grant funding for housing enabling critical infrastructure and the construction of social and affordable housing. In the 2024 budget, the government committed a further $1 billion to Housing Australia to deliver funding in crisis and transitional accommodation through the NHIF. This $1 billion NHIF funding goes towards crisis and transitional housing for two particular cohorts, being women and children experiencing family and domestic violence, or youth who are experiencing or at particular risk of homelessness. This $1 billion in funding will be made available as a mix of grants and loans, so up to $700 million in grants and up to $300 million for concessional loans. To ensure that all states and territories receive funding under the program, the funds have been allocated nationally. The chart that you see here shows that national allocation. This allocation will be held until the 5th of January 2026, which is 13 months from the date of the investment mandate for the NHIF program. We have been working closely with all states and territories to ensure that the funds allocated to each jurisdiction are best directed towards the projects that are likely to meet the most critical of needs and to complement the existing housing and homelessness system. To that end, each state and territory government have prepared and provided a statement of priority that identifies the areas of greatest focus in response to demand and to need. These are available on our Housing Australia website, along with a method of contact for each state and territory. We strongly encourage you to consider these priorities when preparing your EOI and application, and to engage early with our colleagues in the jurisdictions on your project prior to submitting your EOI. As part of our EOI assessment process, Housing Australia will be seeking assurance from the relevant government on eligible projects. This assurance will provide Housing Australia with the local insights on the project's appropriateness, the need that it seeks to meet, the sufficiency of ongoing operational funding support, and the additionality of the project to crisis and transitional housing supply. It is important to note that the state and territory assurances will be vital to the decision process for Housing Australia, but that Housing Australia retains the ultimate decision-making power over the allocation of NHIF funding. Let's now talk about how you can apply for the program. Here we will discuss eligibility, the application process, delivery timeframes, designated usage of housing under the program, the approach to capital distribution, and some other key aspects of the program. So who is eligible to apply? You can apply for the program if you are a state or territory, a local governing body, a local government-owned or territory-owned corporation that is a constitutional corporation, a registered community housing provider that is also a charity, an entity that has the primary purpose of improving directly or indirectly housing outcomes for First Nations people and is a registered charity, and an entity that is a special purpose vehicle that is a constitutional corporation. Projects that are eligible are construction of new crisis and transitional housing, acquisition and conversion of an existing residential building to crisis and transitional housing, and mixed tenure developments that include crisis and transitional housing. We do note here that if you are submitting a mixed tenure development, that NHIF funding can only be used for the crisis and transitional component of that project. The application process for the program will be 2 stages: an expression of interest or EOI submission and a full application submission. If you are successful in the EOI process, you will be invited to submit a formal application. And successful EOIs will be invited to submit a full application within 30 days. In the instance that your jurisdictional allocation has been exhausted, you may be placed on a deferred application list for uncommitted funds. The deferred application list will hold eligible EOIs until jurisdictional funding allocations expire and unallocated NHIF funds revert to a centralised funding pool. If funding becomes available through centralisation, Housing Australia will contact applicants on the deferred list and invite them to submit a full application. For your EOI, we will ask for basic information about the project that will allow us to ensure that funds are prioritised to maximise the positive output of the program, but to minimise your cost and time as much as possible. We will seek assurance from the state government at the EOI stage, as I mentioned, and this will be important in informing our assessment. Speaking about the grant and loan delivery period, for development projects in the program, you will be required to commence construction within 12 months of Housing Australia's approval. Further, for residential low-density projects, you will be expected to complete construction within 2 years of commencement or commencement of upgrade works, and for medium and high-density projects to be completed within 3 years of the commencement of construction. For acquisition projects in the program, the housing will need to be acquired within 12 months of Housing Australia's approval. The designated use period under the NHIF program refers to the period of time for which the housing must be made available as defined in your agreement as crisis and/or transitional housing. This designated use period will be determined by the level of grant and/or concessional loan provided. For funding amounts of less than $5 million, you'll have a maximum designated usage period of 10 years and a minimum of 5. For funding amounts of more than $5 million, your housing will have a maximum designated usage period of 20 years and a minimum of 10. In certain circumstances, you may seek approval from Housing Australia to convert the crisis and/or transitional housing to social housing on the basis that you will also substitute the dwelling with another from your portfolio in order to maintain the equivalent supply of crisis and transitional housing within your jurisdiction. Importantly, I emphasise here that Housing Australia's purpose is to improving housing outcomes for all Australians. Therefore, where it is sensible for the housing to be repurposed and replaced, we remain open to proposals for conversion where justified. The capital under the NHIF program will be allocated on a demand basis and in order of submission. Where the number of EOIs submitted exceeds the amount of NHIF funding available for your jurisdiction, the projects will be prioritised by the extent to which the project responds to identified need, value for money, timeliness of delivery, and also certainty of delivery and certainty of your service delivery funding. Other key components of the program are that there is no minimum or maximum grant or loan amount for each project, nor is there a required ratio of grant to loan. All applications will, however, be subject to the state and territory allocations detailed in the investment mandate and displayed earlier in this presentation. All EOI submissions and full applications must be submitted via the HAP portal. This portal has been designed to accept EOIs and applications for the NHIF-CT program, and guidance on usage will be available. I emphasise here that you should only submit a full application if you have been invited to do so by Housing Australia as a result of the success of your EOI submission. The grant and loan opportunity will open from midday on Monday the 28th of April and will be available until the grant and loan amounts are fully allocated. Once funding commences distribution, Housing Australia will publicise jurisdictional usage on our website. There you will be able to see how much of the funding has been utilised in each state and territory against their allocation. Once funding a pre-EOI consultation service is available to you, and a booking link for these sessions are available on the Housing Australia website in the NHIF-CT section. In order to make these consultations effective and efficient, we ask that you are familiar with the program and its requirements, and that your session be as project-specific as possible. Other important resources can be found on the Housing Australia website, including the NHIF-CT program guidelines, frequently asked questions from national information sessions, an expression of interest fact sheet, and a guide to using the Housing Australia portal to apply for the NHIF-CT program. I strongly encourage you to familiarise yourself with these resources and to book a pre-EOI consultation if you require clarification. Thank you for taking the time to listen today, and the Housing Australia team and I look forward to working with you on this program towards helping more Australians into a safe and secure home.